I didn't walk into that conference room looking for a fight. That matters, because later, when people started choosing sides, some acted like I'd been pushing back for weeks. The truth is simpler. I believed in the rules. I believed that if you did your job, kept your head down, and documented your work, the company would meet you halfway. I'd been at Westbridge Logistics a little over 3 years. Mid-sized, publicly traded, the kind of place that calls itself a family, when it needs you to work weekends. I wasn't naive about corporate life, but I wasn't cynical either. I had good reviews, a clean record, and a contract with signatures on it. In my head, that meant something. When I was recruited, they didn't hire me to learn. They hired me to fix a vendor crisis that was bleeding money. I rebuilt the escalation process, renegotiated terms, and cleaned up reporting, so leadership couldn't hide behind vague dashboards. That's how I ended up at $127,000, not because I begged, but because they offered, in writing, to keep me from taking another role. The contract was straightforward. Base pay, bonus structure tied to deliverables, and a couple of clauses that sounded boring until you needed them. One was about role scope. Another was about retaliation. If my responsibilities or reporting line were materially changed without consent, it triggered severance and an internal review. Standard language, quiet protection. Then the merger happened. New leadership arrived with new titles and the same old hunger. My boss got moved under a new director, Martin Haynes, who came in late summer with a spotless suit and a talent for smiling while he cut. He spoke in slogans, cost discipline, accountability, operational excellence, and looked at people like line items. He hadn't hired me. He hadn't promoted me. And from the first week, I could feel the calculation: who stays, who goes, who can be controlled. For a while, he kept it subtle. He'd forget to invite me to meetings I used to run. He'd reassign pieces of my work for visibility. When a project succeeded, it became a team win. When a vendor missed a deadline, it became my oversight. He never yelled. He didn't have to. He had a way of turning the room slightly colder whenever I spoke. Like attention itself was a privilege I hadn't earned. The morning of the incident, he sent a one-line email to leadership. Need everyone aligned on reducing spend. No exceptions. No context. No plan. Just a warning disguised as strategy. I saw it while I was pouring bad coffee into a paper cup, staring at my calendar. Tuesday, leadership sync. The usual group: operations, finance, HR, and managers who'd learned to nod at the right moments. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself Martin was posturing. In the elevator, Jenna from finance stood beside me and didn't meet my eyes. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "Just don't let him bait you." That was the first time my stomach tightened. By the time I reached the conference room, I was already running scenarios in my head. If he wanted cuts, he'd hit contractors, travel, vendor scope. That would be normal. If he wanted a scapegoat, he'd pick someone visible, someone who didn't belong to his people yet. I still didn't think he'd say my salary out loud. We started the meeting like every other meeting, polite voices over unpleasant truths. I walked through operational risk, vendor performance, and a staffing forecast I'd been warning about for months. Nothing dramatic, just numbers, timelines, and a request for a decision. Halfway through the budget section, Martin leaned back, tapped his pen, and said, "We need to cut waste." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loud. His eyes slid to me like he was reading my name off a spreadsheet. Waste includes overpaid employees. A few people chuckled, thin, nervous laughter, the kind that isn't funny, just safe. I kept my voice calm. If there's a concern about my role or deliverables, I'm happy to discuss it directly. Martin smiled like I'd offered him a gift. "Oh, I'm glad you said that." He turned slightly toward HR, who was on the call and also sitting at the far end of the table. "What's he making again?" $127,000. The room went quiet in the exact way it does when a line has been crossed. and everyone is deciding whether to pretend it didn't happen. My ears rang, not because the number was shocking, because it wasn't. The shock was hearing it used as a weapon. I said carefully, "Compensation is confidential." Martin shrugged. "Confidential doesn't mean unreasonable. That's more than some managers make." "For what exactly?" He didn't ask because he wanted an answer. He asked because he wanted a reaction, so I didn't give him one. I opened my laptop, clicked into my onboarding folder, and pulled up the signed employment agreement. I didn't wave it around. I didn't threaten anyone. I simply shared my screen and opened the PDF. "Here," I said, still calm. "This is the contract you're referencing." His face changed as he read it. The smirk drained away. His jaw tightened. He wasn't embarrassed. He was angry. And I realized why a second later. There it was, in plain language. Role scope, retention terms, and the clause he'd just boxed himself into by making this public. If he tried to strip my responsibilities, isolate me, or force me out without cause, it would trigger severance and a retaliation review. The company had agreed to that, in writing. Martin's eyes flicked up from the screen to my face. "Stop sharing." "No," I said. "You brought it up. I'm clarifying." He stood so fast, his chair skidded back with a sharp scrape. "You think you're smart," he said, voice low, controlled. "You think a piece of paper makes you untouchable." Across the table, I saw our HR manager, Leah, shift in her seat. Her hand moved toward her phone, not openly, quietly, like she'd learned how to do it without attracting attention. Martin walked around the table toward me. I stayed seated, not because I was afraid, because I wasn't going to stand up and turn this into a scene he could frame as aggressive. I kept my hands visible. I kept my tone flat. I gave him nothing he could twist. When he reached my side, he leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "You're overpaid," he whispered, "and you're replaceable." Then his hand came down on my shoulder, hard, not a tap, not an accident, an ugly shove disguised as authority. My chair jolted, and in the silence that followed, I watched Leah's face drain of color. She didn't look shocked. She looked terrified, like she knew exactly what that meant for him, and what it was about to mean for me. For about 2 seconds, nobody moved. Not the managers, not finance, not the people who had laughed like it was a harmless joke. It was like the room had turned into a photo. Everyone frozen, waiting to see what I'd do so they could decide what was true afterward. I kept my hands on the table. I kept my voice even. "Do not touch me again," I said. Martin didn't back up. He stayed close, breathing through his nose like he was controlling himself for the audience. Then he smiled. Small, private, mean. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I was getting your attention." I looked past him at Leah from HR. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was staring at the edge of the table like the wood grain had answers. "Leah," I said calmly, "please document what just happened." Martin's head snapped toward her. "We're not doing this," he said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just repeated, slower. "I want it documented." Martin turned back to me, his face inches from mine. "You want to play lawyer?" he whispered, so low only I could hear. "Fine. Let's see how that goes for you." Then he slapped my laptop lid shut with his palm. Not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to make a statement. He wanted to control what people saw. He wanted the contract off the screen. He pointed toward the door like he owned the air. "Get out," Leah finally spoke, her voice tight. "Martin, we need to follow process." He didn't even look at her. Process is whatever I say it is. In that moment, something settled in me. Not anger, not fear. A cold understanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a person who believed rules were for other people. I stood up slowly and took a half step back, so there was space between us. "I'm leaving the room," I said, still calm, "because you're escalating. I'm requesting an incident report in writing today." Martin gave a laugh that sounded wrong in the quiet. "Sure," he said. "Request whatever you want." I picked up my laptop, walked out, and didn't look back. The hallway felt too bright. My hands didn't shake until I reached my desk. Then they did, small, controlled tremors, like my body was processing what my face had refused to show. I sat down, opened my email, and started writing while it was still fresh. Subject line, workplace incident, request for documentation. I wrote the facts like a police report. Date, time, location, witnesses, exact words, the physical contact, my verbal instruction not to touch me, my request for documentation. I didn't add feelings. I didn't write, I was humiliated. I didn't write, I'm scared. I wrote what could be verified. Then I copied Leah and her HR supervisor. Because HR has layers, and layers matter when the first layer is afraid. I hit send. A minute later, my access to a vendor dashboard failed. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then my calendar blinked, and several meetings disappeared like someone had deleted me from my own week. My chat tool showed limited permissions. I stared at the screen and felt my stomach drop again, sharper this time. They were moving fast, not to protect me, to isolate me. I opened the IT portal to check my account status. A banner appeared. Temporary access changes pending review. Pending review. Review of what? My shoulder being shoved? That was the first time I understood what retaliation looks like when it's wearing a tie. It doesn't come as a threat. It comes as little doors quietly closing. I pulled out my phone and took screenshots. The error messages, the access banner, the missing calendar invites, everything with timestamps. Then I did the thing I'd been avoiding for months. I forwarded my contract to my personal email. Not because I wanted to steal anything, because I knew how this game gets played. If they can't beat you with the truth, they beat you by deleting the proof. My phone rang. Leah. I answered on the second ring. Hello? Her voice was controlled but thin. Are you safe right now? That sentence hit harder than the shove. I glanced around my open plan floor. People pretending to type, pretending they weren't watching me from the corners of their screens. I'm at my desk, I said. I'm safe. There was a pause. Then she said quieter, do not meet with him alone. If he asks you to come somewhere, say no. Leah, I said, keeping my tone steady, is there security footage in that conference room? Another pause, longer. Yes, she said finally. There is. I exhaled, slow. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment, because that meant I wasn't trapped in a story he could rewrite. Has it been pulled? I asked. She didn't answer directly. Employee relations is being looped in. Employee relations. Corporate language for when the company realizes it might be in danger. I want a copy, I said. You probably won't get a copy, she replied quickly like she'd said it before. But it will be reviewed. And my access? I asked. Her voice tightened. I didn't do that. I saw the ticket after it was already in motion. So he had told someone to do it. Or he'd done it through a manager. Either way, it was happening. I kept my tone flat. Leah, I'm documenting everything. I'm not going to argue, I'm not going to retaliate, but I'm not going to be cornered either. She swallowed. I could hear it. I understand. Then she said something that made my skin go cold. He's angry, she said. He feels challenged. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny in it. He put his hands on me, I said. That's not challenged. That's a problem. I know, she whispered. I know. After I hung up, I didn't sit there waiting for the next email. I moved. I went to the printer room. Not because I needed paper, but because it had a glass wall and people walked past it constantly. Visibility is safety in an office when someone wants you alone. I printed the contract. I printed my email. I printed the access change banner. I stapled everything. Then I called my wife and told her, calmly, that something happened at work and I might be home late. I didn't want her to panic. I just wanted someone else to know, in real time, that this was happening. When I ended the call, a message popped up from Martin. Come to my office, now. No subject, no context, no HR. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds. Then I typed back, carefully. I will not meet one-on-one after today's incident. Please include HR in any further discussions. The reply came almost instantly. You're making this worse. And that was when the last piece clicked into place. He wasn't trying to resolve anything. He was trying to get me behind a closed door so he could control the outcome. I didn't reply again. Instead, I walked straight to HR. Leah's door was closed. Her blinds were half drawn. I knocked and waited. When she opened it, her eyes widened like she hadn't expected me to show up. I'm not here to yell, I said quietly. I'm here to make sure this is handled correctly. She stepped aside and I saw someone else in the office, a woman I didn't recognize, older, calm, holding a notebook like it was a shield. Leah cleared her throat. This is Dana, employee relations. Dana looked up at me with a professional expression that didn't soften. Please sit, she said. I sat. I placed the staple packet on the desk and slid it forward. Dana didn't touch it yet. She just looked at me and asked, Did you feel threatened? I answered honestly, Yes. And did he make physical contact with you? Yes. And are there witnesses? Yes, multiple. Dana nodded once like she was checking boxes in her head. Then she said evenly, Thank you for coming in immediately. Leah's hands were clasped, so tight her knuckles were white. Dana opened the packet, scanned the first page, and her eyes paused on the contract clause. I saw the flicker, small but real. Not sympathy, calculation. Then she looked back at me. We will be investigating, she said. In the meantime, you are not to meet with Martin. If he contacts you, you tell us. I held her gaze. My access is being restricted, I said. That started after I requested documentation. Dana's expression tightened by 1 degree. We will address that. I stood up. I want this in writing, I said. You will receive a written acknowledgement today, she replied. I walked out of HR with my phone in my hand and the strange feeling that I'd just stepped onto a different track. A faster one. Because now the company wasn't deciding whether I was being dramatic. They were deciding how much this could cost them. And as I passed the elevators, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Voicemail. I listened with my thumb hovering over the screen. Martin's voice, low and sharp. You don't know who you're messing with. I saved it. And for the first time since that shove, I felt something close to relief. Not because I thought I'd win, but because I finally had proof he couldn't talk his way out of. They thought I was going to fold. I wasn't. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was imagining movie scenes, because my brain kept replaying real ones, trying to find the moment I could have prevented what happened. The shove, the laughter, Leah's face draining of color, Martin's voicemail. I kept hearing one sentence in my head. You don't know who you're messing with. People say things like that when they've gotten away with things before. I went into work the next morning early, before most people arrived, because I wanted to control one variable. I didn't want to be ambushed in a hallway with nobody around. I parked close to the entrance, walked in under the cameras, and went straight to my desk. My badge worked. That was the first sign that HR had intervened. But when I logged in, the reality was still there. Vendor dashboards blocked. Certain folders denied. My calendar full of meetings I could view, but couldn't edit or invite. Like they wanted me present, but powerless. I took screenshots again with timestamps. Then I got the email everyone dreads, dressed up as polite language. Please join a brief meeting with employee relations today at 10. No subject line beyond meeting. No agenda. No HR policy attached. Just a calendar invite with Dana and Leah, and Martin wasn't included. That should have made me feel better. It didn't, because I knew how this could go. They investigate, they find insufficient evidence, and then they quietly decide I'm not a culture fit. Companies do not always punish the person who does the wrong thing. Sometimes they punish the person who forces them to acknowledge it. So before 10, I prepared like someone who'd finally learned the rule of the world I was in. I printed the voicemail transcript and saved the audio file. I wrote a timeline of everything that happened, minute by minute, while it was still fresh. I listed witnesses by name, not in a dramatic way, just facts. And I pulled my contract again and highlighted the clause Martin didn't want on that screen. Then I did something I'd been resisting because it felt like an escalation. I called a lawyer, not to sue the company into the ground, not to make threats, to ask one question: what is the correct sequence if a manager puts hands on you at work and the company immediately restricts your access afterward? The attorney asked me, "Did you report it to law enforcement?" I said no. He paused, then said, "You don't have to, but understand something. HR works for the company. If this gets reframed as a workplace dispute, you can get buried. A police report makes it a documented incident outside their control." I stared at the wall in my apartment and felt that break happen inside me, the one where you stop believing you're protected by being reasonable. I realized I'd been acting like a good employee, and Martin had been acting like a person who didn't fear consequences. That realization wasn't empowering. It was sickening, because it meant the only reason he'd kept it professional before was because he thought he could. At 10, I walked into the employee relations room near reception, the neutral one with the glass wall. Dana was already there with her notebook. Leah sat beside her, hands folded, eyes tired. They had a bottle of water on the table like this was a wellness check. Donna didn't waste time. "We are conducting a fact-finding review regarding yesterday's meeting," she said. "We need your account." I slid my timeline across the table. "It's written," I said, "with times." Dana read silently for a moment. Then she asked, "Did you feel threatened?" "Yes," I said. "Did he intend to harm you?" "I can't read his mind," I replied. "I can tell you he put his hand on me in anger, after I told him not to, in front of witnesses." Dana nodded once. "Did you provoke him?" Leah's face flinched at the word. I kept my voice level. "No, I opened the contract because he demanded it. That's not provocation, that's compliance." Dana's pen moved. "Did you make any physical contact with him?" "No." "Did you raise your voice?" "No." Leah cleared her throat softly like she was trying to remind Donna that I wasn't the problem here. Donna continued, "We also need to address your access restrictions. Those were initiated through a standard process. Pending review." I looked at her. "The timing is the issue," I said. "It started after I requested documentation. That looks like retaliation." Dana didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She said, "We are looking into it." Then she asked, "Do you have any evidence beyond witness accounts?" I didn't dramatize it. I simply played the voicemail. Martin's voice filled the room. "You don't know who you're messing with." When it ended, the silence was heavier than before. Dana's expression didn't change much, but Leah's did. Her eyes went wet, fast, like she'd been carrying this alone, and the sound confirmed what she already knew. Dana said, "Thank you. Please forward the audio file to me." I did it right there on the spot and watched the email leave my outbox. That was my first micro-relief. Proof placed in the record, in writing, in a system I didn't control but could later subpoena if it came to that. Dana folded her hands. "In the interim," she said, "we are issuing a no-contact directive. Martin is not to meet with you. Any communication must go through HR." I nodded. "I also want my access restored," I said. Dana replied, "We will work on appropriate access for your role while the review is ongoing." Appropriate. That word made me angry, but I swallowed it. Because anger was what Martin wanted. If I got emotional, it would become a story about my temperament. I asked one question instead. "Have you pulled the security footage?" Dana paused half a beat. "Yes," she said. "It has been requested." Requested, not reviewed, not confirmed. Requested. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk and tried to work with half my tools missing. I answered emails, I documented, I kept my head down, I did the boring things that keep you credible. Then, just after lunch, my phone buzzed. A calendar invite popped up from Martin. Subject line, performance discussion. No HR included. No Dana. No Leah. My throat tightened. I didn't accept. I didn't decline. I forwarded it to Dana with one line. He's attempting direct contact despite the directive. 5 minutes later, the invite disappeared. That was my second micro-relief. Someone, somewhere, was actually enforcing something. And then the opposite hit. At 3, IT emailed me. Your account access has been temporarily modified per management request. Per management request. Not per HR, not per investigation. Per management. I stared at the words and felt the last of my patience burn off into something colder. Because it meant Martin, or someone aligned with him, was still pushing buttons. Still trying to corner me. Still trying to make me small. I stood up, took my printed documents, and walked out of the building without telling anyone where I was going. Not because I was running, because I needed one move that couldn't be spun internally. I drove to the nearest police precinct. In the parking lot, I sat for a full minute with my hands on the steering wheel. My heart wasn't racing. It felt heavy, like I was stepping over a line that would make this real in a way the company couldn't absorb with a memo. Inside, I told the officer the truth, calmly, like I was reporting a broken window. My manager shoved me in a meeting. Witnesses were present. Security footage exists. After I reported it to HR, access restrictions began. I have a voicemail that sounds like intimidation. The officer asked, "Do you want to press charges?" The question landed in my chest like a weight. I thought about my career, my mortgage, the office politics, the way people whisper when someone causes trouble. Then I thought about Martin's hand on my shoulder, the confidence in his voice, the fact that he'd tried to meet me alone again, and I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. If I let this go, it doesn't go away. It just becomes the story he tells next time, with someone else. "Yes," I said. "I want it documented." The officer nodded. He took my statement. He gave me a report number. He asked for the names of witnesses and the company address. When I walked back to my car, the air felt different. Not lighter, clearer. Because now there was a record that didn't belong to HR. Now there was a line in the world that said, "This happened." I sat behind the wheel and stared at the report number on the paper. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from Dana. "Please call me as soon as you're available." And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Because HR doesn't ask you to call as soon as possible, unless someone above them has realized the company is standing on a ledge. I didn't know it yet, but the footage had finally been pulled. And Martin's little shove wasn't the biggest mistake he'd made. It was the first one they couldn't hide. Dana didn't call to check on my feelings. She called because something had changed. When I returned her call from my car, her voice was controlled, but the cadence was different, less scripted. "Thank you for calling back," she said. "Where are you right now?" "In my car," I replied. "Off-site." A pause, then, "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Okay," she said. "I need to inform you of 2 things. First, we've issued a formal no-contact directive to Martin in writing. Second, legal is now involved." I didn't say good. I didn't say finally. I just asked, "Did you review the footage?" Dana hesitated half a second. "Yes," she said. "A portion of it." A portion. Corporate language again. Controlled. Careful. "What did it show?" I asked. "It corroborates your account," she said. And that was the closest thing to an admission I'd heard so far. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "And my access?" I asked. "We are restoring access necessary for your role," she said, effective immediately. Relief hit me, fast and sharp. Not emotional relief, strategic relief, because it meant someone higher up had overridden management request. I said, "I filed a police report." Silence. Not shock, not outrage. Silence like a calculator finishing a sum. Dinah's voice came back, even softer. "Thank you for telling me. We'll need the report number." "I can email it," I said. "Yes," she replied quickly. "Please do." Then she said, "We need you to come in tomorrow morning, not to your floor. The conference room near reception, 9 o'clock. "Who will be there?" I asked. Dana paused. Employee relations, legal, and your interim leadership. Interim. That one word told me Martin was no longer sitting comfortably in his chair, sending IT tickets like he owned the place. I hung up, drove home, and spent the evening doing what I'd learned to do. Prepare like the truth wasn't enough. I printed everything again. Timeline, contract, screenshots, voicemail transcript, police report number. I backed up the audio file in 3 places, and I wrote down the details nobody thinks to write down until later. Where people were sitting, who laughed, who went quiet, who avoided eye contact. Because I knew something else too. If this became a contest of credibility, the small details would matter. The next morning, I arrived early and sat in my car until I saw Dana walk into the building. I followed a few minutes later, checked in at reception, and was escorted to the glass-walled conference room. The room had that sterile, corporate calm, like it was designed to make conflict feel inappropriate. Donna was already seated. Leah sat beside her, looking like she hadn't slept. A man in a navy suit was on a laptop screen, legal counsel, and across from them sat my VP, Richard, a quiet man who usually avoided drama by delegating it. An empty chair sat at the far end of the table. Martin's chair. Dana started. This meeting is to address yesterday's incident and next steps. Legal spoke next, without introduction. We have reviewed the available footage, he said. We have also received the voicemail you provided. He looked down at something off screen, then back up. We need to ask you directly. Did you file a police report? Yes, I said. And do you intend to pursue it? He asked. I intend to keep it documented, I said carefully. And I intend to cooperate with law enforcement. Legal nodded once. Understood. Richard cleared his throat. I want to say, he began, that we take workplace safety seriously. It sounded like a statement he'd practiced in the mirror. I didn't react. Dana slid a single sheet across the table toward me. This is the written acknowledgement of your complaint, she said, and this is the no-contact directive. I read it. It was clean, formal. It stated that Martin was not to contact me in person or digitally, and any communication would go through HR. Then I noticed something else. It also stated that any retaliation would be investigated as a separate violation. That was my first micro-catharsis. Not emotional, not triumphant, just the quiet satisfaction of seeing the company commit to words that could later be used against them if they didn't follow through. Legal said, we will also be restoring your access immediately. Any changes to your tools or permissions must be reviewed by employee relations for the duration of this process. I asked, who initiated the access restriction ticket? Dana's eyes flicked to Richard. Richard's jaw tightened. It was submitted by Martin, he admitted, after the meeting. So it was real. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't standard process. It was him trying to squeeze me. Legal leaned forward on the screen. That is a concern, he said, and it will be addressed. Then Dana said, we need to discuss your reporting structure. Effective today, you will not report to Martin. My chest loosened slightly. Richard added, you'll report to me temporarily. Temporarily. Another word that mattered. I said, is Martin on leave? Dana didn't answer directly. Martin has been instructed not to be in the office today. Not in the office. That meant the company didn't trust him around me, or around anyone. Richard looked down at the table like he wanted the meeting to end, but I wasn't done. I had one goal, make sure the ending didn't leave gaps. I want to understand what happens next, I said, because I'm not interested in a quiet, vague resolution that leaves me exposed. Dana's tone was careful. There will be a formal investigation. Witnesses will be interviewed. Findings will be documented. And if the findings confirm what happened? I asked. Legal answered this time. Then corrective action will be taken. Corrective action could mean anything from a warning to termination. I didn't let them hide behind that. Define corrective action, I said. Richard finally met my eyes. If what we saw aligns with what you reported, he said slowly, then he will not remain in a leadership position. not remain in a leadership position. He didn't say fired, but he also didn't say coached. That was my second micro-catharsis, a partial payoff, a door opening. Then the chaos hit. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from an unknown number. "You think you won?" My stomach tightened. I didn't answer it. I didn't even show it around the table like a trophy. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Dana and Legal with one line. "Received during meeting." Dana's face changed, just a fraction. Legal's voice sharpened. "Do not respond," he said. "I wasn't planning to," I replied. Dana asked, "Can you confirm the number?" I did. Richard's shoulders slumped like a man realizing this was now bigger than internal politics. Dana stood up. "This meeting is paused," she said. "Please wait here." She and Leah stepped out of the room, leaving me and Richard and a lawyer on a screen. Richard rubbed his forehead. "This is unacceptable," he muttered more to himself than to me. Legal said, "It's also helpful." Richard blinked. "Helpful?" "It establishes a pattern," Legal replied, "and it undermines any narrative that this was a misunderstanding." I sat there, breathing slow, because it was true. Martin could have apologized. He could have gone silent. He could have tried to be charming. Instead, he was doing what angry people do when they realize they're losing control. He was leaving evidence. Dana returned 10 minutes later, and there was a new person with her, a uniformed security supervisor. Dana's voice was steady. "We have received additional communication that violates the no-contact directive," she said. "We are escalating internal safeguards immediately." She turned to me. "For the rest of today, you will work from home. We will arrange for you to retrieve any necessary items with security present." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He nodded. Dana then said the sentence that turned everything from corporate to real. "We have also been contacted by law enforcement regarding your report," she said. "They requested confirmation of our security footage retention." My pulse jumped once, hard. So the police report was already moving. Not fast like TV, but fast enough. Dana continued. "Legal is handling that request." Then she added, "Martin is not authorized to be on site." Not authorized. That meant badges, access, security. Finally, a hard line. I left the building that morning escorted by security, like I was a VIP. Not because they respected me, but because they didn't trust him. At home, I tried to focus on work, but my brain kept circling one question. If Martin was willing to shove me in front of witnesses and then violate a directive the same day, what else had he done when nobody was watching? That question got answered sooner than I expected. Late afternoon, Dana called again. Her voice was flat in a way I hadn't heard before. "We uncovered additional issues during the review," she said. "What kind of issues?" I asked. A pause. "Documentation manipulation," she said, "and attempts to retroactively justify personnel actions." My mouth went dry, because that wasn't just about me anymore. That was a leadership problem. Donna continued. "Legal wants to meet tomorrow. There will be an updated plan." I asked, "Is Martin being terminated?" Dana didn't answer immediately. Then she said, "I can't share specifics until the process is finalized." But her silence said enough. Because companies don't bring in legal, security, and a VP, and then use words like manipulation, unless they've already decided the person is toxic. When the call ended, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my printed contract. I remembered Martin's whisper, "You're not going to win this." And I realized something else, something darker and calmer. He wasn't afraid of me. He was afraid of what the contract represented. A paper trail, a boundary, a truth he couldn't dominate. And now that truth was pulling everything else into the light. I didn't know exactly how Part 5 would end yet, but I knew it wouldn't end with him walking away and me moving on. Because he'd crossed too many lines in writing, on camera, and now by phone. The company could spin a dispute. They couldn't spin a pattern. The next morning, Donna didn't schedule a brief sync. She scheduled a formal meeting with a docket number in the invite and 3 names attached. employee relations, legal, and my VP. That's when I understood this was no longer about he said, she said. This was about containment. I joined from home. Camera on. Notes ready. Calm face. Dana opened the meeting with a sentence that sounded like a door closing. "We have completed the initial investigation and reviewed all available evidence," she said. Legal was on screen again, the same navy suit, the same controlled voice. Richard sat in a conference room with Dana and Leah, looking like he'd aged a year in a week. Legal didn't waste words. "Security footage corroborates physical contact," he said. "Witness accounts corroborate the sequence of events. The voicemail and subsequent text messages corroborate intimidation and violation of the no-contact directive." He paused. "Martin's employment has been terminated effective immediately." No dramatic music, no cheering, just the reality of the sentence. Dana added, "His building access has been revoked. Security has been notified. His company devices are being retrieved." That was the first time I felt my shoulders drop, not from joy, from safety. Because the main danger in situations like this isn't the shove. It's the person who believes consequences are optional. Richard cleared his throat. "I want to acknowledge," he said slowly, "that what happened was unacceptable. You did the correct thing by reporting it. We failed you by allowing your access to be restricted after you asked for documentation." He looked at Dana like he was choosing each word carefully. "That should not have occurred." Dana nodded once. "Access has been fully restored," she said, "and we've placed safeguards on any future changes. No manager can initiate a restriction on your profile without employee relations approval." I took a breath and asked the question that mattered most to me. "What happens with the police report?" Legal answered. "We have preserved the footage per retention policy and have acknowledged the request from law enforcement. If they subpoena materials, we will comply. We are also filing our own internal incident documentation." I said, "I'm willing to provide a statement again if needed." Legal nodded. "Understood." Dana leaned forward slightly. "We also need to address retaliation risk," she said. "Your contract clause regarding role scope and retaliation is valid. We will honor it." Then she added something I didn't expect. "We found additional misconduct," she said. Martin attempted to retroactively create justification for personnel actions. He also misrepresented compensation approvals to leadership. That is part of why this moved quickly. The room went quiet for a beat, because that meant it wasn't just me he'd targeted. It was a pattern. Richard spoke again, quieter. "We're conducting a broader review," he said, "but your situation is resolved in terms of reporting structure. You will report to me for now, and we will align a permanent structure in writing within 30 days. In writing, that mattered. Dana slid an electronic document into the chat. "This is a written outcome summary," she said. "It confirms that you were not disciplined, that your complaint was substantiated, and that no contact violations were documented." I opened it and scanned for the line that would protect me later. It was there. Substantiated. That one word is the difference between an employee being labeled difficult and being recognized as credible. Then came the last piece, the part companies usually avoid unless they have to. Legal said, "We're offering you a settlement option." Richard's eyes flicked to the table like he didn't love that it was happening, but he understood why. Legal continued, "This would include compensation aligned with the contract's severance provisions and a mutual non-disparagement agreement, should you choose to separate from the company." I didn't answer immediately, because the truth is I didn't want a payout as a prize. I wanted my life back. I wanted to know I could walk into work without scanning corners. I asked, "If I stay, what guarantees do I have that this doesn't follow me?" Dana answered before legal could. "We will document your reporting line. We will document your role scope. We will document that the incident was substantiated, and we will monitor any actions that could be perceived as retaliation." I looked at Richard. "And culturally?" I asked, "because people saw what happened." Richard finally met my eyes. "We'll address it," he said, and he sounded less like a leader and more like a man who understood he'd let something rot. That afternoon, I made a decision that surprised even me. I didn't take the settlement. Not because I was loyal, because I didn't want to leave like a person who got paid to disappear. I wanted to stay long enough to see the new boundaries hold. So I replied, I'm staying for now, but I want the written structure within 30 days, and I want a written acknowledgement that my access restrictions were improper. Dana nodded. You will have it, she said. Legal added, we'll amend the outcome summary to include that acknowledgement. And that was it. No speeches, no hugs, no we're family, just paper, process, consequences. 2 days later, I returned to the office. My badge worked. My access worked. My calendar looked normal again. People avoided my eyes at first, then a few approached quietly. Jenna from finance stopped by my desk and said, I'm glad you didn't let him do that to you. Another manager, one who'd laughed in the room, stood awkwardly and said, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I nodded. Now you do, I said, and that was all. The only moment that felt like real closure happened a week later. Leah asked if I could talk privately. Glass room, door open. She looked exhausted but lighter. I wanted to tell you something, she said. I waited. She swallowed. When you asked me to document it in the moment, I was scared. Not of you, of him. Because he'd done things before. Pushed people, cornered them, made them feel small. But nobody ever made it official. She looked down at her hands. The police report changed everything. It forced the company to stop pretending. I sat back and let that settle, because that was the point I'd been trying to explain to myself since the shove. You don't win these situations by being louder. You win by making them real, by putting a number on it, a timestamp, a report, a document, by dragging it out of the shadows where people like Martin thrive. And the last loose end, the one I needed for peace, came a month later, exactly on schedule. Richard emailed me the permanent structure in writing. My scope was defined. My protections were acknowledged. The retaliation clause was reaffirmed. Clear, boring, official. I printed it and put it in the same folder as the contract. Because the strangest part of all this is what stayed with me. Not the shove, not the humiliation. It was the moment HR went pale. Because I finally understood what that look meant. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. And I promised myself quietly that if I ever saw that look on someone else's face, I wouldn't be the person who laughed to stay safe. I'd be the witness who spoke.